This is Bloomberg Law with June Grosso from Bloomberg Radio.
More than a dozen states quickly embraced new CDC guidelines that say fully vaccinated Americans can ditch their masks and forgo social distancing in most cases. But the sudden change has led to questions and concerns from those who say there's no easy way for businesses and others to determine who's fully vaccinated and who's not. Joining me is Rob Fuller, a partner with Nelson Hardiman. So the new CDC guidance came as a surprise to many health and state officials. Should it have been done so seemingly abruptly?
Well, I think the guidance itself was science-based. The problem, I think, is messaging. You know, we're on the honor system, whether you've had a vaccination or not. The guidance, based on a study of 4,000 healthcare workers, basically proved the efficacy of the vaccines. The vaccinations work. They protect you against serious COVID disease. And so when compared to additional safety you might get by continued mask wearing and social distancing, it was negligible, not measurable in the study. So the guidance did follow the science. Unfortunately, like here in California, we don't have very many people vaccinated in the big scheme of things. More than 60% of the people remain unvaccinated. So it's confusing for business owners and everyone else that, if you let 100 people in your store, statistically, that more than 60 of them are unvaccinated. And so for the safety of your own workers, might well consider continuing a mask mandate on your own, regardless of what is the public perceived CDC guidance that masks are no longer necessary.
Well, also, it seems like there are problems because the state guidance is different from the CDC guidance. You mentioned California is one place where that is true. Until today, New York is now going to lift its state mask mandate. But in other states, there's a conflict. So what do businesses do?
Yeah, I think it's a messaging conflict. But when they lift their mask guidance in New York today, for instance, it still recommends that if you're unvaccinated, that you continue to wear a mask. It just wasn't going to be a matter of requirement. CDC guidance also continues mask wearing for public transportation and plane travel. But a private business person is in a tough situation. Obviously, you want to cater to the customer, but you also, under OSHA and other laws, have a duty to keep your workforce safe. And knowing that most people are not vaccinated yet, if you're a business owner, you could just very sanely decide that the best thing for now, for another month or two, is to continue to require masks. And of course, that produces what we see on TV with angry, maskless people being denied entrance to certain stores that have decided to do that because of all the prior politicalization and guidance shifting quickly. It is a messaging mess and leaves the individual business person in quite a quandary.
The guidance from the CDC was rolled out on Thursday. OSHA hasn't substantially changed its masking recommendations in almost 4 months.
That's correct. OSHA will err on the side of worker safety and will be much slower than other agencies in recommending discontinuation of masks. And I think, common sense would tell you that if most people are still unvaccinated, it probably makes sense to keep masks on the requirement list in the workplace for at least a little while longer until most people become vaccinated. And then, the issue is that the masks work, despite the prior politicization of whether mask wearing was, taking away my freedom and all that stuff. If you look at any large Asian city, the deaths from COVID are just a small fraction of what we experience in the United States. New York City had 32,000 deaths, and Los Angeles had 24,000 deaths. If you look, Hong Kong had 200 deaths, Singapore 31 deaths. Even Tokyo, which, quote, had a problem, is fewer than 2,000 deaths, less than 1/10 of what Los Angeles experienced. So, it's kind of a large data point that we have is that the masks really work. And I think the way to look at the CDC guidance is that, okay, once you're vaccinated, you've got just as much protection as the mask, so you really don't have to, wear the mask. But they, in my view, didn't emphasize enough that the vaccination was the key to demasking. And, the average person hears, okay, masks aren't required anymore, CDC says so, and they skip over the point of whether you're vaccinated or not. And I think that's unfortunate, and that's what we're looking at here.
Do you think part of the reason for the new CDC guidance was to encourage people to get vaccinated?
Yeah, that was part of the thinking from what the public spokesperson said and Dr. Walensky, that, okay, you can now discard the mask if you're vaccinated. And I just don't think that was a strong enough message. It was there, but it should have been the headline. It should have been the lead, as they used to say, and not buried. It really, I think, got buried that the trade-off for no mask is getting the shot. And there's no question in my mind that's what they're trying to accomplish. And so they're trying to incent people to get the shot so then you can, even under the honor system, get yourself free of the mask. And Americans just aren't good at the honor system or that smart. I think we've proved that in really addressing these serious public health issues and wearing the mask when they should have. So I think for any excuse not to wear a mask, people are going to do it. And if you're challenged, there's no vaccine passport. You just say, hey, I got vaccinated, and you're good to go. But that's not really what people should be doing. They should be very serious about getting the shot before discarding the mask.
Coming up, vaccine passports. This is Bloomberg.
The beauty of balance.
Can I help you, ma'am?
Washington Post reports a $735 million weapon sale has been approved by President Biden's administration. The paper also says Congress was notified earlier this month. It comes amid ongoing violence in the region between Israel and the Palestinians. The fighting has resulted in hundreds of deaths. I'm Tom Roberts.
A Nigerian man is in police custody for allegedly filing 102 fraudulent jobless claims in Washington state. Abidemi Rufai is accused of wire fraud for allegedly applying for $350,000 in benefits from Washington's Employment Security Department. I'm Brian Shook.
This is Bloomberg Law with June Grosso from Bloomberg Radio.
I've been talking to healthcare attorney Rob Fuller of Nelson Hardiman about the new CDC guidance for mask wearing. Also, is the CDC guidance, is it a little confusing? Does it address, what you have to do when you're on an airplane or schools?
Well, schools they left local. The areas there were 3 areas they said you still needed to wear a mask no matter what: airplanes, healthcare facilities, and public transportation. And I think that's just a recognition that the vaccination rates are just not high enough to support a full demasking of the public at this point. But again, I was disappointed in the emphasis and the messaging that really didn't come through, at least in what I read and heard over the last couple of days.
The United Food and Commercial Workers Union criticized the CDC for failing to consider how the new policy would affect grocery store workers who have to deal with customers who are not vaccinated.
Right, and there's no way you can force them to wear a mask, really. If the store management isn't going to continue a firm masking policy at the front door, which many of them are not, if you have 1,000 people go to a grocery store right now, 600 of them at least are unvaccinated. So there's going to be continued spread of COVID, and that exposes the workers. I mean, the only good news for the workers is the same for everyone else. If you get your shot, the data show from the study that CDC relied on that you are extremely well protected against serious disease. It's a kind of everyone for themselves sort of thing right now.
This weekend, walking around in New York City, I'm fully vaccinated, and I assume a lot of other people are, but every time you want to go into a store or somewhere, you have to put the mask on anyway, because most of the stores are requiring masks still. It gets to be, well, why even bother taking it off when I'm walking around outside? Yeah,
there is an element of that, and we're in a transition period. And I just think, if this advice had come out, a month from now or middle to late June, when maybe hopefully 60, 65, 70% of the population is vaccinated, then I think people would have felt a lot more comfortable in going maskless, and businesses probably would have had less of a requirement. But it's very, very conflicting right now for a business owner when 60 or so percent of the people are not vaccinated, and you're exposing your workforce. And you really can't require your workforce to get vaccinated either, but you can encourage everyone to get vaccinated, and that's about the best you can do. And it just is going to be messy for another 6 weeks or so, in my view.
So for employers, can employers ask employees to give them information about, whether they've been vaccinated or not, or does that impinge on their privacy rights?
Yeah, it varies by state. If the employer is paying generally for health care, the employer, under the federal law, has the right to know about the employee's health status just because they're a payor. So there's some ability of the employer to gain information in that regard. Some states have more strict laws, however, and make it on a need-to-know only basis. And right now, I think employers can ask most places, but the employee isn't required to tell them or to get the vaccination. And I think that's going to change. It's a subtle but important difference as to the status of the shots. Right now, none of the shots are fully authorized by the FDA. They're under the emergency use authorization, which is different from full accepted authorization. And once the FDA moves and has full accepted authorization, then there are jurisdictions in which employers will be able to mandate that employees get the shot, or school districts will be able to mandate that youngsters get the shot before going back to school. So that's coming. It's just not quite there yet because the vaccinations are not fully approved by the FDA at this point.
At the beginning, I heard a lot more talk about herd immunity. Are they giving up on herd immunity?
No, I mean the problem with herd immunity is that it's neither herd nor immune. We have, unfortunately, a virus that is highly mutagenic, and there are new variants being created every day. So the number of people who have to be fully vaccinated at a period of time when the virus is stable was thought maybe to be, in the 50-60%, but what I've read recently, it's more like 85-90%, because the stability of the virus is very short-lived. It mutates, and then the number of interactions that people have, given the transmissibility of the virus, just overwhelms what's called the R number, the ability to transmit it. If we could all, it's funny, but if we could all lock ourselves in a closet for 14 days, this entire thing would go away.
Really?
Yeah, because it wouldn't be transmitted, and the virus would die in its host within 14 days.
What about the variants?
Well, they're a big problem. I mean, that's the giant unknown. So the two unknowns we have, and why you shouldn't throw out your mask quite yet, are, one, how long the antibodies and T-cell response from the vaccinations persist. Everyone's hoping it's years, but it may be only a few months, and we don't have that data point yet because people haven't been vaccinated that long. They're hoping a robust T-cell response continues for years in the vaccinations, and that would be terrific news. But we don't know yet. We won't know for a year or two as to what the persistence rate is. The second giant unknown is how the variants are going to affect both transmissibility and the ability to create serious or fatal disease. And so we have to be prepared that one of these variants is going to skip over the protection of the vaccine and basically set us, at day zero again. That it's like a new virus being spread. And that's the problem with unvaccinated people, is that they're like little mini laboratories for further mutation of the virus. Now, the silver lining in the virus that might skip over the current vaccines is that the scientists have done a darn fine job in creating these platforms, and they can quickly develop a booster shot or additional vaccine that would be able to get on top of most any variant that would come, our way. So it's, I think, going to become something like the flu shot situation where you get one every year. It's not a great match, but it keeps you from getting really sick. And I think the COVID situation is going to be a lot like that, where it's going to continue to flourish. There are parts of the world that have no vaccine yet. So, there's literally hundreds of millions of people who are able to get the disease, transmit it, and create mutations. And so new versions of it are going to be coming up for years to come at this rate, and it's going to be a couple years before we get the vaccination worldwide in a significant enough number of people to get on top of it, and that's including keeping on top of variants. So, we're in a nice kind of, you've been vaccinated, you're in a good spot right now, and all the variants seem to be reactive to the existing vaccines. But that could change, and it's not the end of the world. But we, need to be vigilant and to, follow guidance if it turns out one of these variants is not captured by the existing vaccines.
Well, do we even know, do we need to get booster shots within 6 months?
We don't know that yet.
Different, yeah, that sort of is another problem, a big problem.
Yeah, no, it's a big problem. But we've only, the first person vaccinated in the United States was in November. So, this is only 6 months right now. So if we go find that person and take their blood and analyze it, we can kind of figure out how much, persistence there is. But there's such a small group of people in November. It's really going to be more like the summer or this fall before we'll have enough people with the vaccines to be able to analyze how persistent the antibodies were and how persistent the T-cell response was. So that data point as to how persistent this stuff is will be coming later this year. But again, we'll only know that it's at least good for 6 months or at least good for a year, and it'll be an ongoing study as to, how long you have to keep going and whether you need booster shots. And my expectation is the antibodies are going to go away within a year, and we're all going to have to get, as I said, the annual shot, just like the flu shot.
Vaccine passports, people were saying that wearing a mask took away their liberty and their rights, and vaccine passports seem to be even a step up from that. But do you think that's the only way to really tell? Because the honor system, I don't know about the honor system.
Think that the politicalization of the masking and the passports is nonsense. It's a health issue. Either you're going to take care of yourself or you're not. If you don't want to, fine. I'm not going to think a whole lot less of you, but it's pretty dumb, given that there's a fatal disease out there that you can prevent. But I have got no question in my mind if President Trump had stood up and said, folks, we have a situation here. We all got to wear masks and socially distance for a few months while the scientists get on top of this. We would have had a much different outcome in the United States. We would have had hundreds of thousands of fewer deaths. And it's as simple as that. He enabled a whole bunch of people into, frankly, some not great thinking on the problem that this was somehow elimination of freedom. We didn't have that problem in 1918 with the flu that came through. People all masked up and wanted to mask up. They wanted to, keep themselves healthy. This nonsense that you're entitled to not keep yourself healthy. Okay, fine, but that's kind of a silly thought, right? You just go out and step in the street and hope the bus doesn't run you over just because, I'm got to be free to walk in the street. No, there's sensible limitations on what you can and can't do, and wearing a mask during a time of pandemic is a sensible limitation in my view. And it's got nothing to do with freedom. It's got to do with sensibly taking care of yourself and taking care of others. But not for the message, but it's going to be a problem because there's always going to be unvaccinated people who will continue to, as I said, generate these mutations of the virus.
Finally, some states are offering, like Ohio, offering to give $1 million to 5 vaccinated lottery winners, and New Jersey was offering a beer with a vaccination. Do you approve of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to get shots in arms. It's only going to be to our global benefit. We have to get shots in our own arms. We have to get shots in all the arms in Africa and Asia. And it's going to be a multi-year project. This virus will persist long after, the next few weeks. And next few weeks is going to be confusion in America as shop owners and business owners try to figure out whether to bring workforces back and what the rules of the road are going to be. But the only way to really get on top of it is to get, a vast majority of the population vaccinated against this thing.
Thanks, Rob. That's Rob Fuller, a partner at Nelson Hardiman. I'm June Grosso, and you're listening to